opened my mind that this was more about soil health. And if we improved the soil, it improved plants, which improved animals. And then in the end, improved us.
Brad, thank you for coming, sir.
Yeah, I'm so thankful to be here. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Appreciate
of course. Yeah, and sorry for making you slog through traffic and the accidents. Like downtown Eagle area is a train wreck right now.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah. Once you get past it, it wasn't bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, 2026 all the way up.
Yeah.
Probably not the smartest decision.
You know what? We all learn. We live and learn. So listen, I got connected with you. And when I told my wife, I was like, dude, I got this guy, Brad, coming in. He's a farmer. He's a rancher. Like, it's going to be great. She's like, is it this guy? And she holds up her phone on your Instagram page. And I'm like, yeah, I think that's him. And she lost her mind because she has been so excited about getting a great, reliable source of protein. I have a friend who raises a couple head of cattle every year, and we're like trying to get on like his list, but that's not a reliable source of protein. And again, it's just, you know, beef, which I love beef, right? Yep. But I also love chicken. I love pork. Right. Like I have a pig roasting oven that I made myself. Like I've done a lot of pig roast, but the protein question for me started really when I was in college because I had a fish tank, and it was, I know it was ridiculous, right? But I had a lionfish like in my dorm room. It was like, imagine having a couple beers and they're like, let's play with your lionfish. Yeah. It's not a good idea. But what I realized is when I go to the store and get fish to throw in like the feeder fish, right? Mm-hmm. The store owner the fish store owner who I became friends with, this cranky guy from Virginia, he was finally like, look, Matt, these are not very good protein. I was like, what? It's a fish, bro. Like, what do you, he's like, I know, but like the fat and the micronutrients and all these, and it really turned me on to saying like, okay, but it looks like a fish. He's like, that doesn't matter. It's essentially like a ball of trash. And that changed the way I started thinking about the food I was eating. Right. And I would love to say like I was wholly on board 100% from the get-go, but it's been this slow progression of, oh, we likely just eat, you know, balls of trash, but they look like cows and pigs. Yeah. Right. So how did you enter into this world?
So
bring this a little closer, baby. There we go. Get comfortable. Just take it with you. Get wherever you want to go.
So I'm a 4th generation farmer, recently more a rancher, moving that way. But in 2009, I was back from college, really kind of diving into the family business with my dad, and realized that there were some things that weren't adding up. It was expensive. We weren't getting paid as well. And so I really started getting into the trend that was more in the Midwest of soil health. And we went to some conferences and met some really key people in my life that really taught us a lot of, well, let me back up. I was going more that route to save money, less passes in the field, saving on diesel, all those things. And so when I went to these conferences and met these key people, they opened my mind that this was more about soil health. And if we improved the soil, it improved plants, which improved animals. And then in the end, improved us, because those nutrients, like you were talking about, right, balls of trash, that those nutrients would follow who was eating them.
Right.
So I dove off the cliff of soil health and headlong. It's still my huge passion is soil health, because it is what is all the talk about carbon and carbon credits. The soil can do this, but it takes animals to go along with this. And so we went down that road and realized we needed to bring animals back to the land. My grandfather had animals. It was a really diverse farm. But as agriculture got bigger, we started removing fences, and it's happened all across the country because they're an inconvenience. We could use chemicals and other things in fertilizer to get the same job done that they did with the proper rotation and with animals. And so we started putting fences back in, realizing we needed these animals, but not having an outlet to sell them for a proper margin to keep us in the business of animals, because it's quite expensive to raise these animals in the way that we wanted them done. Rotationally grazed, always moving, keeping the land cleared and keeping animals on a fresh pasture. That was really important to us, and that's our ideals, because that's how we build soil health. So in 2015, we got really into cover crops, brought the animals back, and then realized, hey, the local market is not how we're going to make our money. it wasn't profitable to do that. We had to start selling direct to the consumer and getting
you're
this healthy
saying, like,
protein out.
the local wholesale market, right? So if
Yeah.
you're going into stores and like, hey, I have this really good chicken, or hey, I have this really good brisket, they're like, that's great, Brad. And it's this much per pound. You're like, but it's really good.
Yeah, right.
MTU Studios is the proud producer for the Ada County Sheriff Podcast, the Idaho Wildlife Federation Podcast, the State Representative Ted Hill Podcast, the Idaho State PTA Podcast, and many more. If you or your organization is thinking about starting a podcast, MTU Studios would love to help. Just check out mtustudios.com.
Yeah, the wholesale buyers, there's a few really good ones, but we were first actually trying to go with our cattle to the local sale. And they're just, the market wasn't there. I wasn't playing, I was too small, and moving them every day, putting that much labor into them, it just was too expensive. So we knew that we had to find that consumer. We had to start sharing our story and getting that message out and letting people know that we're here and we're available to be purchased from, because we had this really good product. But you can have an amazing product, but if you don't get it to the consumer, you go broke. Right. And so you still have to share the message. And as farmers, we've lost a lot of that art of getting in front of people and wanting to have that one-on-one relationship, which is key in this environment to get this healthy protein out. So we started with eggs was our very first thing that we started with. And then we added pigs, and then the wholesale cattle, and then meat chickens and turkeys. And so that's been since 2015 was the first eggs. And then 2018, we really started ramping up. And then 2 years ago, we got an on-farm store, and it's just been evolving as we went. COVID was a big deal for us because everyone tried to go local instantly overnight, and we were sold out within just a few days. It got really crazy there. So we're kind of on the backside of that, just continue to be in front of the customer and sharing our story of that, I am fourth generation. My kids are fifth. We're all working on the farm together. My dad's there, my brother, and his family. And so it's just this family environment that we do have some other employees that we raise these animals ourselves. The chickens and the pigs, we raise the grain for them. We make their feed. The cattle are rotationally grazed. And so it's all happening right there on our farm in Caldwell, Idaho.
God, man, talk to me about how you communicate with people about the difference. Because again, a chicken is a chicken, right? A fish is a fish. When I'm throwing these balls of trash into my fish tank for my puffer fish and lionfish to eat, I recognized that there was something wrong with them because I was informed of that, but I didn't know what it was. And it wasn't compelling enough to just be like, as like a 20-year-old, I'm not saying I made the best decisions, right? But right. What is it that people need to understand? And we understand. I mean, like I've watched several, Michael Pollan, the food and ag writer. He was actually a client of mine. He's the one who taught me how to pig roast. Oh, nice. So I worked with his son for SAT prep, and they were having this pig roast at the end of essentially at the end when we were done with the program. He was like, "Yeah, you want to come? Like we're starting on Friday." And then we're eating on Saturday. So I got to go on Friday and like hang out with these guys, and they stayed up, all night watching the pig. And it just understanding that world is like, okay, there are real problems with the way these animals are grown. Like you see King Corn. I don't know if you've ever followed that, but a documentary that really follows the nutrient values of corn and the trace minerals from corn. And it starts out with the two guys that are doing the documentary going to a lab. They do hair samples, and the guy analyzes them, says, okay, you're about 85% corn. They're like, what do you mean? They're like, you're like everything you have, 85% of it comes from corn. So they go and figure out like, okay, the cows are predominantly corn, right? Like all of this is gigantic ball of starch that is used for batteries, that's used for feed, that's used for all of these different things. And it all gets worked in with like Fritos and cereal and, then milk, obviously from cows, and then proteins that we eat. It all comes from corn, and that has problems with it, right? Not only do we have an over-reliance on this monocrop kind of ecology, but there are also problems with the nutrient values, right? And there are problems with treating animals like you can just feed them whatever they can fit in their mouth, like slop feeding and whatnot is just atrocious. So what are the big things that people need to understand about your protein?
So the biggest difference is we're using a lot of the same genetics that, people are used to, Angus and Berkshire and all these, key genetics. What we're trying to do is give them the most optimal life that they possibly can get with the proper nutrition, and that way the consumer has the proper nutrition to them. And so when it comes to pork, they're still getting grain. Our pigs are corn and soy free. And the soy, we started off real big because we had to bring it in. And, the whole discussion of non-GMO, I couldn't trust that train load of soy that was coming across, that it wasn't going to be contaminated by the time it got to us. And then there was also people that have, some real allergies to that. And so it ended up being, we could get access to peas real easy, and I could trust that a pea was non-GMO. And so that's how we started. And so we mix our own feed. And so it was just easier in the beginning. And now we do it because, of other reasons. But we're corn and soy free to the pork, and we know what's going in. We know every ingredient going in because we give it to them. Then
I don't mean to interrupt, but the pork in particular. Do you ever see that episode of Dirty Jobs with Mike Rowe where he goes to the pork provider or pork rancher guy in, like, I think it was just outside Vegas, right? And he's taking all of the scraps from the buffet that get delivered to him, because they had to get rid of them somehow. They get delivered to him, and he has this giant silo where they're just like mixing it up, and then they just dump it out into these troughs. When I saw that, and I was like, God, man. So one, I had a pig guy back in California, and it was not a guy like you. It was just a dude at a butcher shop who I knew could get me pig. And when I was talking to him, this guy at Verbroge in Oakland, I was like, hey, where's your pig come from? And he's like, oh, it's great stuff. It's like, okay, here we go. Take two. Where's your pig come from? He's like, I was like, is it local? Cause I'm, trying. And he said, yeah, it gets shipped to us. I was like, okay, take three. Where does your pig come from? So he's like, well, it comes from Canada. I'm like, okay, we established, like, I don't have anything against Canadians. Like, well, some of them, but not all of them, right? So I find Canada. And then I was like, all right, what is it fed? He's like, oh, it's really great. You should come get a couple pork chops and try it. I'm like, okay, not what I'm asking. I trust that you could make it delicious. Like, I like a McDonald's hamburger. That's delicious. Fine. But what the hell is in it? And he was like, it's wholesome fed. It's not slop fed. I could not get an answer out of this guy. And that really concerned me, because pigs are one of those animals that are incredibly durable. They're incredibly robust systems, and they can take an immense amount of abuse and keep growing to the point where they get served to you. So when you talk specifically about pea protein and things of this nature, it's like, okay, so you're not like taking your dinner plate and just straight to the trough every night.
No, we've actually had restaurants try to give us slop, and it's just not what we're into. We want to know, exactly what they're getting. We're providing it. I don't want trash, and because I don't want trash going out.
Right.
And so we're very sensitive to that. They also have access to pasture every day of their life. And so we rotate them every 3 days between paddocks. And so they get access to that grass, and they eat a lot of clover, alfalfa, young. We keep the grass real short so they can get the good stuff out of it, and gives them a lot of good, healthy protein. And they're an omnivore, so they're not going to digest a whole lot of it. A lot of it comes out the back end.
Right.
But it does. They eat a lot of that pasture, because you're able to give. And if you look at nature, they get a lot of that too. Right. So we're trying to replicate nature as best we can within our. We're men trying to control this chaos. Environment. Yeah. And so we know that they source nuts and a lot of stuff in nature. We don't have access to that. We provide the grain that we can grow ourselves, and we know it's non-GMO because we're growing it ourselves. We control the nutrition of the soil as best we can, and so that's what we're providing, and we're providing that rest and rotation to the land as well. And we're just trying to mimic nature as best they can. The pigs are moving in nature,
right?
We're trying to move them. Keep it going.
You had a great clip on your Instagram where you were just walking around one of the pig pens, and there's some pig like taking a nap under a bunch of like wood chips. And he's like runs off. I thought it was hilarious to watch, but it's also one of those things where like, okay, that's just an animal messing around, right? Running around this area. You're not walking. It didn't appear, at least, that you had like rain boots that were covered in like a foot up.
Yeah.
Like that looked like a fine place to be walking around.
Yeah.
And as far as the nuts, actually, I went hog hunting in Florida years back, or excuse me, Georgia years back, and we were going around at night with this sketchy dude in an A-team van. We get in the back of the van and there's just a bunch of ARs on the back door, which is great. I was like, awesome. We're like, this is going to be awesome. And he's like, here's a joystick. And this is literally like a 1988 van. It's like, what the hell? And it's like, the sun's going down. He's like, this is the joystick. This controls the night vision. I was like, what are you saying to me? And he had a camera on top of the van that was hooked up to an Atari joystick. So you just go left and right. It was like,
that's awesome.
And we would go around. We were going around to peanut farms and a bunch of other farms. So the farmers would call him and be like, hey, we got some hogs here. And he's like, okay, we got to get off his phone. He's like, all right, we got to go like 2 miles this way and go through all these back roads. And then we like pull up. He kills the lights. He's got his night vision on, so the pigs can't see us coming. But they were going all through those fields, obviously wrecking crop, which is a problem. But they are omnivores and they do self-select that stuff, which is great.
Yeah, their nature's plow.
Yeah.
And when we come through and clear land and we'd like these nice, perfect straight rows, they don't care. They'll go right. I mean, they can destroy a field in hours. I mean, they can just completely ruin a farmer's crop. They're just doing what they were intended to do.
What pigs do.
They might be in the wrong environment at times. And so we're trying to control that by moving them quicker, keeping them from tilling the land as much as possible. We do have to reset their paddocks because they're a pig, and we're not going to ring them. That's what a lot of people do, is put nose rings in to keep them from digging. It's not what we're going to do.
Is that why? I never knew that.
Yep.
So that's so they don't, get into the ground.
Yeah, it's
painful.
Painful to pull on their nose, and so.
Holy cow, man, that's wild.
Yeah, that's why they ring them.
Yeah. So you guys don't do that.
No, we don't do that. It would help the pasture probably if we did, but we're trying to keep them, as natural as possible, and keeping them healthy and moving in that fresh environment. A pig's gonna poop where the pigs want it to poop. They're pretty clean animal. They want to go to the bathroom in the same area, so we clean that out weekly. Just because we have their shade, they got to have shade. They can't sweat. Yeah. And so we provide a waller and we provide shade, and then they rotate out of that into the other paddocks where they have their pasture, and then they come back to the shade. So that all stays the same. And so we just keep them straw and keep them as comfortable as possible. And at night is when they do their most grazing, just like we're hunting at night. That's when they're going out into the pasture and doing their grazing. So
they just slop around in like cool shade and mud and water during the day. And then at night, because they can't perspire, that's when they go out and do their most damage. Yep. What do they do in winter? Like, are pigs pretty hardy in the wintertime?
They are really hardy, actually. They're just a tough animal.
Yeah, right.
They don't have much. They will hair up pretty decent, but we provide them a couple feet deep straw bedding so they can burrow in there with all the other ones and like sausage links laying across. But we try to keep the wind off of them, so we have their house angled, to kind of block the predominant winds, and they're out in nature, we don't baby them that much, but we do provide the straw and that shelter for them.
Right.
And
consistent food supplies, obviously.
Consistent food and water for them. And then at night, they'll go out and play around.
They mess around in the snow and stuff?
Oh yeah. They'll go play in it. They're pretty tough. They really are. Now the chickens don't like that.
Yeah.
The chickens hate snow. It's a fence for them, but the pigs don't care.
That's awesome. So raising pigs, you have that portion of the ecosystem, which is like this huge soil turnover, a lot of fertilizer, big omnivore, doesn't care what it's eating, just plowing through it. Where did the chickens fall in here?
So originally we got the chickens as kind of a pasture sanitation crew is what I call them. Mm-hmm. So we have mobile coops that we built ourselves, and we move them a few days behind the cattle, trying to clean up their cow patties and get rid of the fly larvae. That was our initial goal with the laying hens, is to mimic nature. The whole thing we're always trying to do is mimic nature. If you think back to when the buffalo were coming across the plains, or the elk and deer herds, as they traveled across, huge migrations of birds followed, and they were coming to clean up the pats. And so they would spread the manure out, which is they spread the fertilizer farther, and then they would eat any larvae in the dung. And so everywhere they went, the birds would follow. And so we're trying to mimic nature as best as we can. So we grow that healthy soil or healthy crop that is taking the sun and pumping that sugar and carbon into the soil. And then that herbivore comes through, harvests that big grass, poops it out, and the birds come and spread it and clean it. And then 40 days later, we're back there again. That cycle's turning over, and that fresh grass blade is pumping carbon back into the soil again. And so that's where they fall in is we're sanitizing with them. And this is the layers. The meat chickens, they're a wimpy.
Why? Wait, why?
They just don't travel well. And so the laying hen's going to travel and follow the cattle and do its thing. But the meat chicken, yeah, they're just really susceptible. The way they were bred, the Cornish cross just isn't a tough animal.
Yeah.
And so we have to protect it more.
Are there nutrient requirements that vary between the different types, like the laying hens versus the meat hens?
Oh yeah. Yeah. The laying hens, different protein requirements that, for the egg, more calcium, because every day they're pulling calcium out of their bones to make that egg shell. So we're always trying to keep that balanced and keep it up for them. But yeah, they move easier, they're hardier. And then the meat chicken takes a higher protein, and they're just
sit around.
They just sit around.
Just
they're
getting jacked.
Yeah. They just grow fast. And like I try to tell people, we haven't done any of the more heritage breeds that are a lot slower growing. They take about twice as long to finish and do their thing, and they're hardier. They move better. But the typical housewife isn't used to that breast. They're not used to cooking that type of chicken. And so we try to take what's standard, what they're used to, and provide that better life, that better food, that better quality of protein that they're used to and familiar with and know how to cook with. But it's a bigger breast instead of a real lean breast.
Dude, this is really upsetting to admit, but my wife got, before I met you, my wife got some Butcher Box protein, right? Yep. She got a brisket. She's like, hey, I got these briskets. First off, the briskets were tiny. They were like this big. Yeah. I'm used to some like Costco mammoth, 50-pound hunka, not nasty. I was like, oh, awesome. Like I'd love to cook this. So I go out and put it on the barbecue, and come back hours later and totally botched it. Like absolutely. Because I mean, you didn't have the fat. You didn't, like, completely different cooking style. Look, enough mashed potatoes and a little sauce. Like it was fine. I choked it down. But the cooking disparity because of the layout of the protein and fat content, totally different. Do you have that same kind of thing in like pork? I mean, it sounds like you obviously have it in chicken.
Yeah. So the pork is actually, we try to make it a little bit fattier than what people are used to from the store. A typical hanging weight in commercial industrial hogs is about 160 to 180. That's what they're shooting for. When I say hanging, a killed carcass hanging in the cooler. Right. We shoot for like 230, 210, 250. We're in a range there. The reason they start putting on fat, intermuscular fat. When they get a little more fat on their back, they're pumping it into the marbling. And so our goal is to, and the fat is flavor and juiciness. And so our goal is it is going to get a little older. It's going to be probably another month and a half older than the standard, sometime 2 months, but we feel it's a lot more pleasurable eating experience. It has more moisture, but it does come down to like people understanding how to cook pork. There is such thing as dry pork, right? We've all had it.
Oh, dude, it's the worst.
So dry.
Oh, you're just eating chalk. Oh, and like people are like, no, I put garlic in it. I don't care about your garlic. I'm eating just sand. Fried. Yeah, I'm eating sand and garlic. So, low and slow pork. Yeah, pork's always a lot better when it's low and slow cooked. Right. But I was not a pork man before we started raising it.
my brother just was all about the pork chops, and I never ate at a restaurant. I hated the pork. It's always dry. I didn't like it.
It's trash at restaurants.
Oh, just I hated it, and so I always ate.
It's
the
like
beef.
overcooked calamari every time. Every time.
So we were probably a year into raising pigs, and I had, well, I had some roast in the slow cooker, whatever, sausage. And my brother Ben, he just kept saying, "You got to try the pork chops on the Traeger," and I'm like, "Nah, pork chops are trash." So I finally did it, and salt and pepper on a Traeger, pork chops, low temp. I mean, there's nothing better. That fat and on that Traeger and that salt and pepper, it's my favorite. I'll eat a pork chop over any steak now. I love them.
Listen to me. Next time you come in, we're cooking meat beforehand, and we're gonna eat, because I'm getting so hungry talking to you about this. Yeah, if you do the pork chop right, and you treat the pork correctly, it is so damn good. Yep. Oh my gosh, I've always been a huge fan. I love it, like last couple times we've done it, and again, like commercially raised, from like Costco, and I'm like, no, let's do chops, and I do this honey garlic reduction with a bunch of things, white vinegar in particular, but do this big marinade, and then you cook them, and it's like, damn it, man. Like, it's just, I like waved it in front of the fire too. It just dried out instantly. Yeah. It bothers me.
No, so
that's why I can't mess around with New York's. Like, if I go to a restaurant and they're like, do we have in New York? Like, it's delicious. I'm like, keep your swine meat. Like, I can't, like, it's terrible. Like, I need a ribeye all day. Or people talk to me about fillets. They're like, oh my gosh, the filet mignon so good. I'm like, the only reason you like that is because you're a one-hand eater and you don't want to pick up a knife, right? Like, there's a reason they wrap it in bacon, because it doesn't have flavor and fat the way we like it. Like, when's the last time you saw a bacon wrap ribeye? Never, but that's a great idea, actually. Damn, you heard it here first.
Bacon infused burgers. Bacon. Is great. That's
the best.
That's the one thing that we don't have in this area is USDA bacon.
What do we have?
Like where we go at Northwest Premium, their cure is not USDA, so we can't sell it by the package. I actually brought a package today. We just have to cut the belly. We have to slice it raw. It's just belly. We can't sell bacon, and so that's one thing that's missing in the Treasure Valley is that small batch cure facility that's USDA would be awesome. We've sent some just recently to a place in Oregon. We haven't got them back yet, but if it works out, it's gonna be a lot better, because we'll get ham and bacon and lunch meat and some other stuff, hot dogs back, but. It's a pretty clean facility. So that's what we're hoping works out. But right now in the Treasure Valley, we don't have that. And so it's like bacon. That's like, God, it's so good. So
it's the best.
So yeah, that's one thing. But yeah, I love our pork. But yeah, anyway, you can mess up anything, right? Cook it wrong.
Yeah.
And there are some that might just be tougher. It's genetics. You're gonna have an animal that's more nervous than other animals is going to be a tougher animal. It's always twitching. It's always just on edge. And so we're always genetic wise trying to get rid of any flighty type animals. We want animals that when you walk in, they're just going to be more calm, unless they're startled like the pig.
I was going to say,
they're going to be startled.
Tweaker pig.
Yeah. But most of the time when you're walking around, we just want them to mill around us. Same with our cattle. We don't want ones that are head up, running, because they're just
anxious.
They're anxious, and it does affect the flavor and the toughness.
Is that so you actually breed based on personality, essentially, or anxiety, or penchant towards anxiety?
Yeah. If we have a heifer that's flighty, we won't breed. She doesn't make the cut.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
And so we're like, our bulls always have to be calm and quiet. Yeah. And so we also get steers from, we have some people that we're working with up in Indian Valley and that do our same mineral program and follow it. And so same with them. We want docile. We don't want flighty animals. And so any of those get cut out. We do not purchase those from them. And so, yeah, we have our children around. We don't want animals that are that are angry. Same in the pigs. Pigs can be pretty destructive to a human.
Oh,
You
they
know,
can
if
kill
they
them,
get real
right?
mean. Oh yeah.
Didn't you see that Hannibal Lecter movie where they were going to feed him
Yeah.
to the poor? And then when I was a kid, I remember my my brother, older brother, not great, but I remember him telling me that the mob would feed people to like a 600-pound starving sow, and like they just like you can't stop an animal like that.
I don't know that person, but it happened. Like my
I
grandpa.
don't know that person.
My
You know,
grandpa.
you
Yeah.
are the person that the guy was talking about
Yeah.
in that movie
Yeah,
Snatch.
that's
Like,
right.
always know a man
Yeah.
with a pig farm.
Yeah. But my grandpa, yeah, anything that died on the farm, he put it with his house. That they just ate it. And that's just what they did back in the day to clean them up. But
Fine.
so we don't keep, you know, we have roosters that live with the pigs. Any rooster we get, they go to the pigs, and it's kind of funny. Most mornings you go over there and roosters are walking on the backs of the pigs, and you're just going through. But
Wait, why do you put them with the pigs?
because we don't want the roosters with the laying hens, because they can get aggressive. We have
Yeah,
people,
sure.
We have people in and out all the time, and roosters can be aggressive.
Oh, they're dick. They're
Yeah.
horrible. Yeah. Wait, so like what? Do they just live amongst the pigs forever?
Yeah.
Just walking around harassing them?
Yeah, they actually just live on their backs mainly, and then kind of scratch around in their straw and just live their life over there. And there's a bunch of roosters, and they don't get aggressive with each other because there's no hens around. So it's just they're just docile too. But we just don't want customers coming over and, you know, getting attacked by a
some
rooster.
dick rooster.
Yeah, the hens are already like pecking at their legs anyways. It's already traumatic for some kids, some adults too. But yeah, so we just don't let any of that kind of protein. They have access to it, so they don't ever get that sense to try to bite and nibble.
Yeah.
So
I had a buddy Juan Zasueta. There he is. He was always last in the yearbook because his name started with Z. Anyway, so Juan's dad, Junos, who was awesome, right? And he came from Mexico when he was like 5 or 6, and his whole, like, he lived in a suburban neighborhood, like, you know, where I live, but his entire thing was like this insane, slapped together farm. And he's a landscaper, so it was like he'd have a bobcat in one corner, a giant row of bricks down the center that he'd like salvaged from some job, and then all around it was like every single plant and animal you could, like, he had ducks, they had roosters, and there was this one rooster because they had chickens and stuff. They were his own. The chickens for protein. There's this one rooster, man. I was in like 6th grade, and that fucking thing, it would come after me every time, and his neck would get all, and it was like, sixth grade Matt was not very tough. So I always end up like jumping on the brick pile to avoid the rooster.
yeah.
It's not good.
I don't like it when they come after me either. Even right now, they're always trying to be dominant, but yeah, there's some tricks to try to keep them from being dominant. We just don't keep them with them.
Yeah, right.
Some come in the group, but we just put them over the pigs, and it's far enough away that they don't ever, come back. And we actually have people drop roosters off. It's funny, like roosters will just show up, so people know that there's just roosters there. So and then they have a good life, they live their life. So, but yeah, that's the pig,
that's the chicken and pig.
Yeah, how we are using them. And then the cattle can go farther. The cattle eat a lot more. They can take a lot of refuse down, those cover crops down, and get ready for that next cash crop. But we can get them across a lot of acres. They can move easier. They fence easier. They're more sensitive with that fencing. Pigs are sensitive to hot wire, but I'm always nervous about taking a pig next to a neighbor's house and having to get out and tear up a yard.
Right.
It's like, so we keep them in their area so we don't have, those escapes where, they get out and do a bunch of damage.
Yeah, right. Because I mean, and again, just getting them back is going to be a pain.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They're monsters.
They don't herd like a cow.
No. Yeah.
It's just it's a whole different deal.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, first off, and again, I know we were chatting about pigs, but with your cattle, like, do you also go through a similar process to try to bring more fat to the cattle, or do you let them be leaner? Because I know, again, I recognize that a lot of the cattle that's store-bought, or a lot of beef that's store-bought, is really fatty. And like you got that corn-fed stuff. And again, like, I've eaten it a gajillion times, right? But what do you do with that? Because again, every time I've gotten, more grass-fed stuff, it's been far, far leaner.
So as a grass-fed rancher, whatever you call it, there's ways of getting them to gain weight, not as fast, but similar to grain-fed. It's with proper nutrition, and genetics have a play in that too, whether they can do it on grass, but a lot of it comes back to their gut biome. If they're healthy and they have healthy bugs in their gut, it's a walking composter. They can take these fibers in. They have the proper bugs, and it's it's got the energy in the feed. It's going to put fat on. After they have to have so much every day for just maintenance of their body. All the excess becomes fat, and then it's a matter of time after that. So we're looking for a really filled out brisket. There's that extra skin, and if you ever look at an animal, they have this roll that's right there, and some breeds have more than others, but when that gets tight, then there's fat there. And there's the other indication we go for is on their tail at the back. On both sides, you'll see these kind of balls of fat that are right on each side of their tail. When they get those and they get a full brisket, we know there's intermuscular fat. And so that we're using an eye. Different breeds do that at different size. And so that's why in grass fed, you can get these variant in hanging weights, because we're not pumping them. We're not in a feedlot, pushing the exact proper, perfect nutrition to them every day to get the frame size up and then put all the fat on them. So the animals are selecting in the pasture all the time what they like. So some are getting higher protein, some are getting higher energy. So you have this variance in frame size, but we're going to that brisket. Is the brisket full? Is their tail fat? And when we have that, then we have intermuscular fat typically in the meat. And so grass-fed does get that bad rap because a lot of times they're just butchered too early. Right. Because it's expensive. All that time that you have that initial big investment into this animal that then takes another 2 years to finish. And so when it's coming up to wintertime and they don't want to overwinter that animal because it's expensive, they'll just butcher them and butcher it early, and it's leaner. You're trying to meet a kill schedule and all these different things that keep meat in the store and keep things going, but we're just really sensitive. Is the animal finished? And if not, sometimes we just lose kill spots because the animal's not ready. And we are very sensitive that animal's ready.
Yeah.
So with the proper mineral, we force a lot of good, healthy salts and minerals in them, trying to make sure that that meat is real mineralized. And then we keep in front of cover crops, real young, lush growing crops, because that will have high energy and the proper protein to put fat on them. So that's what we're doing.
I had a guy, a beef guy back in California for some time. And he was great to work with, like totally fine. And he would deliver and it was great. But a lot of times I'm like, dude, this is really like, sometimes the meat would be on point. And then other times I'm like, I am just chewing through jerky here. Like, what is this? And then he fell off the map. And I found out it's because he fell off the wagon. And so it was like... And it's so like, I think he was just doing exactly what you're saying, which is, hey, look, I gotta hit this schedule. I gotta whatever. So sometimes the meat was really on point and then other times it wasn't. And it really soured me, especially to getting that delivery style meat, the kind of bespoke product, because like, it's too inconsistent. But again, it sounds like that's more a function of impatience instead, or impatient and not really, not protecting your customer as much as you're protecting, just the schedule you've set to. Right.
And there's just some animals that just don't have the right genetics to get it done. You're trying to provide everything for them and they just don't get it done. But
what do you do with them?
We do non-premium. So if they're
so
just
you
not
just let
finishing,
them know.
Yeah, we have some non-premium sales, and so we just tell them they're going to be tougher. Some of them are just, people are like, oh, they were just fine. But we just are nervous to have that bad experience. Yeah. You get typically one shot, to have that good experience for the customer. If you screw it up, you lost the customer, right? And I'm sure we've had, some of those out there. I never hear about it, but I'm sure there's been some. And so I'm just nervous for that. So always trying to do our very best to keep the very best feed in front of them. We also block out dates. We don't harvest in the heat of the summer. Being grass fed, it takes more energy to get through that heat stress. And so typically I can't provide enough forage, the proper forage to keep them gaining. They just kind of flatline during those really hot months. So we just don't butcher during that time. Because if a grass-fed animal's not on the gain, the flavor, the chance of a flavor being off is greater than other times. And so we block that out.
I had no idea that animals get because I had a wine guy in here a couple years ago, and he was talking about how the grapes stop growing if it gets past like 103 or something. He's like, everything closes up so that they don't lose moisture. But I had no idea that animals were also adversely affected and essentially have a hard time continuing to put on weight.
Yeah, it just comes back to, at those times, we don't have trees.
Yeah.
So we're out in the open. It's hot. I mean, we're over 100 degrees some of those days. And a cattle's stress point, they're comfortable from about 15, 20 degrees to 70. Heat stress starts after 70, 75. And so if you think about from 75 to 105, that's a big gap. And so when it gets that hot, all they want to do is mob up and drink water. They're just not out eating a lot. So their forage intake goes down. Therefore, their energy level drops, and what it takes just to maintain that body, they're just sitting in it. Not that they can't gain. In feedlots, they keep gaining, but it's just that heat stress takes a lot more out of them, and then they just don't get the intake that they need. And so we need like mobile shade structures. We just haven't got there yet. We need to provide shade. We probably need to do better that way, in keeping them on the gain, because that's what's important to that flavor profile. And so we block out those months. And then if we're ever changing feeds, like in the fall, when we go from our like just pasture clover mixes into a cover crop, we'll take 3-4 weeks off when they're in there in that, crop change, because, their gut's adjusting. And so we just take off some of those months. We're just trying to be sensitive to that customer experience.
Yeah. You ever been to Disneyland?
I have, but when I was real young.
Yeah. So if you ever drive down I-5 towards Disneyland, you pass, I think it's Hearst Ranch or whatever ranch it is. Harris Ranch. There it is.
Oh, yeah. Harris, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like the surface of the sun, right? Like you just see the heat waves coming off the piles of crap, because it's like a mountain of trash, right? And there are those cows just, I always assumed, because they're, beef is such and cattle industry is so big in places like Texas. I always assumed that cows were plenty happy in hot weather because that's where they are raised, right? Like you don't see, it sounds like cows would be really happy in like Napa, just cooler temperatures, rolling hill, no problem.
So a lot of our breeds around here are, from the England, like Angus and stuff is from, a cooler environment typically. I mean, they can get warm too.
You mean the Highland cows with like the 4 foot long hair? They're not Idaho bred.
So a lot of stuff around here has all been introduced, a lot of the breeds, but in Texas, they're just going to go with, a shorter haired, the Brahma and, some of those more heat tolerant breeds. The problem with the more heat tolerant breeds in our area, that they don't handle the cool as well, but then they struggle getting marbled as easy as well for us. So, we're just sensitive to that. And the Angus does well. They've done well at selecting those genetics for marbling, and so we do a lot of red Angus and try to give them the very best nutrition, best life that they can. Probably need to add shade of some sort, but that's the next level of maintenance and infrastructure.
Is besides being super awesome looking, is there any benefit to Highland cows? Because like they are just the sickest looking animal ever.
I think it's all environment.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they were bred for a specific environment.
Yeah.
And I've met people that's all that they raise, and they say the meat's fantastic. And I think it goes back to, what are they eating? How are you treating them? What mineral are they on? Is it the right time of season for harvest?
Sure.
All those things matter a lot. I mean, it depends on who the human is and how they're handling it.
Sure.
So
Going back to birds real fast. I'm sorry, I have so many questions.
yeah,
We're gonna have to do multiple of these
yeah,
because I want to come see your farm and
yeah.
see the operation.
And
But
come out.
turkeys, you said you raise turkeys
Yep.
too. Okay, who gets the unfortunate job of the artificial insemination?
Not me. we
Another dirty jobs with Mike
yeah,
Rowe episode.
yeah. We get them from Dunlap Hatchery in Caldwell. Luckily, we don't have to do any of that. We do a big batch for Thanksgiving.
Gotcha.
So we don't have any USDA grind, type options around here. So it's parts, pieces, and whole birds. And typically that's a holiday bird. I mean, if we could get turkey grind, then we could do it all season. But so yeah, we'll be getting them the end of June, and then they'll be harvested in October.
Yeah.
In November, getting ready, for the holidays. So awesome bird.
Yeah.
I love the turkeys. They're really like a dog. They'll follow you around the pasture. They
That's
like
awesome.
human interaction. When we get them as day olds, we keep a kid in there the whole time with them. They like to have that parent type,
Oh.
like the meat birds. They don't care too much about you. The turkey does a lot better if they have that human connection and that interaction with them right off the get-go. They go to water better. They go to feed better. And so
When you say kid, I thought you meant goat. Do you actually have like
No.
one of your kids playing,
Oh, yeah.
one of your children playing with the turkeys?
we said have them go in there, long time during the day, play with the water, play with the feed, just kind of interact. Because then they go to it better. And then they learn who that, humans are, helping me type thing. And then we move them in the pasture, keep them on a good life, and
And then cut their heads off.
they have one bad day.
Yeah, that one bad day.
Yep.
Just one.
Yeah.
We have horrible Tuesdays every week. They just have one bad day.
One bad day, yeah.
That's awesome. I had no idea that turkeys were friendly. My
Yeah.
only experience with turkeys, kind of around college, was there were these wild turkey, flocks that were wandering around, Berkeley, and of course the environmentalist groups were like, bowing down to these turkeys. It's
yeah.
like whatever, and they got huge. They were like 3-4 foot turkeys and stuff,
yeah, they're big.
and they were knocking people off bikes and chasing people out of parking lots and stuff. And we couldn't do anything. You couldn't do anything with them or to them because people would be like, "Don't touch the turkey. This is the turkey's land." I'm like, I don't think that's very accurate. Like, I don't think turkey. Yeah, no. Yeah, so I had no idea that they could be bred like dogs and effectually, in effect, be affectionate.
Yeah, like just kind of like the Cornish cross chicken is more docile than a laying hen. Same thing with these turkeys. What people are used to in the store is a double-breasted turkey. So we take the same breed and just give them access to pasture. They love bugs. Like we'll get grasshoppers in the summer, and when we let them out in the morning, they run all over that pasture getting all the grasshoppers. They love bugs. They love chasing things and just exploring, and they're just docile. That breed is just, you can get a few that kind of ruffle their feathers at you, but they're not going to knock you off a bike.
Dude, they're not coming after you.
Right.
They're not coming after you. The construction where you're just trying to put up a building and they're like,
yeah. So no, turkeys are great. Yeah, they're a fun bird.
That's awesome.
yeah.
What cooking tips do you have for somebody? Let's start with pork. All right. If you're doing pork from you guys, what are the big things?
I mean, really the biggest thing is low and slow. I mean, that helps really a lot of the meat. Just those connective tissues. But I mean, it's pretty simple. I tell everyone, like a pork chop, just pepper and salt on a lower temp. We use the Traeger, any of those type of smoker grills, and it's just going to turn out. We have all kinds of cuts though. I mean, we in my house, with having 6 kids, we do a lot of crock pot meals. And so we do a lot of pork roasts and just those slower deals because we're gone and busy a lot. And so that's the key. And the beef, if we've done our job right, it's going to cook very similar, but same thing. You don't need to crank it up, dry it out. I think there's been a lot of education with social media and stuff of those proper techniques. But it's just good. And then the chicken is really moist and tender. I mean, my favorite probably is a spatchcock chicken.
I have
It
no
just
idea what you just said. What's
so
a
spatchcock
spatchcock?
chicken, it has the backbone removed and it's butterflied out.
Gotcha.
And so it just cooks so even all the way through. We do the same thing for our turkeys, for our personal ones. We actually take a Sawzall and cut the back of the turkey out and lay it out, and it just cooks super even. So you don't have to try to heat that cavity. And so it's all about keeping the temperatures and then not overdoing it. Keeping your thermostat in and doing it properly, not letting it go too much.
Who you said education on social media about cooking? Like, what are you talking about? Who?
Well, just the social media in general. There's a lot of cooking tips and techniques out there that people are more aware of than grandma just always just threw the roast in the oven, and never checked temps. And we have all the access to good technology with thermal pins and stuff now. So meat's expensive, right?
Right.
It just costs a lot. It costs a lot to raise these animals. And so we need to be doing a good job on the other side too, of not, going to the right temp and not going over and treating it right, because the nutrition is going to be more available too,
Right.
when it's not overcooked and when you're treating it right. So
Right.
that's,
The thing that, and again, I briefly mentioned this to you before, I think before we started, is the big transition for me as a consumer, right? And really viewing my, the classic examples, like you vote with your dollar, right?
Mhm.
So considering myself a consumer and a voter for food, a lot of what I had to stop thinking about was that the protein is a commodity, right? Like I told you, 2x4s, right? Like you get a stick of Doug fir from Home Depot versus Lowe's versus Ace, and yeah, Ace is going to be more expensive. But the point is, like, you're still getting a stick of wood, right? Like that's essentially what you're going after, and it's the same type of wood, and straight, not straight, whatever. But it's just not that way with protein. It's right, like a little bit more so with like apples, right? Like I like a good Honeycrisp. Pink ladies are fine. My dad came up with this. My dad gave me an apple the other day. It was a couple months ago. It was like a Tango something or apple, and it was like spicy. I couldn't believe it. I was like, God, I love apples. Right?
Yeah.
They're fantastic. Anyway, but like apples, you get an apple from Trader Joe's versus an apple from Albertsons versus an apple from Costco. It's like you're getting apples, right? But this is just this is not that. Right, like the experience that the animals have had, the way that they are handled, one bad day versus every bad day versus standing in a mountain of feces, just in 105-degree, watching people drive to Disneyland, like that is not a happy animal.
Right. Yeah, I think I go back to
You
mimicking
got to come
nature.
back, come back
Yeah.
to me, come back to me.
So-
On the mic. There we go. You can move, just take it with you.
Yeah. It goes back to mimicking nature and what they were intended to do.
Yeah.
And that's our goal with the farm. Our goal is to give them as many good days as possible. They have the one bad day, and hopefully that day they didn't even know it was coming.
Right.
That's the goal is to keep it as calm as possible. But our goal is to be rotating them to mimic nature, but to keep them with as good of nutrition as possible, keeping their mineral up as much as possible. We know when their minerals are up, the chances of them getting sick, the chances of them having those off days go down. They can handle heat stress better. All those things, any type of stress, they handle it better. And so that's the goal, is to get that protein as full of nutrients as possible. So when you, the eater, experiences the protein, you're satiated. You're like, yeah, I feel good. I don't need a bunch more. It's not empty. It's not empty. It's not full of water. It's a nutrient dense product. And so, yeah, there's ways that people treat them all different ways. You got your, bird houses that are just jam packed full. You've got really concentrated agriculture, but we have ours fairly concentrated, because we're mimicking nature. We're going in herds and we're moving every day. And so they're not as concentrated what you see in the feedlot, but we keep them in groups. And so they're trampling stuff down into the ground and letting that cycle back for the nutrition. But it's building healthier and healthier soil that then returns when they eat it again. And then it comes to us when we get to eat them. And that's hard for some people to to see that cycle, but that's what nature was. These herbivores could take down this big grass and turn it into protein into stuff that we could eat or other animals eat. And that's the cycle of life. Like this continues to go. So yeah, we try to give it this as blissful of life as possible.
As blissful of life as possible.
You know, they're calm, and our meat birds, we move them every day forward. We have 15 by 60 wide pins that we slowly move them forward every day, so they're on fresh grass. They're not standing in their own feces. The same with the laying hens. We're moving them up the paddock and every day, and the pigs, they get their new paddock, and the cattle move 2 to 3, sometimes 4 times a day into that fresh feed. And it's as calm and peaceful of life as they can get, that we know how to provide them. Now we're men trying to control animals, right? There's still some part of nature that's not there, but we're trying to mimic it as much as possible, and get that protein as full of nutrients as possible with some really good feed.
Man, I got to come see this operation.
Yeah.
Cause it's just,
Welcome.
yeah. Like even from your social media, it's something I watch. I'm like, that just seems right. Like, again, I know I mentioned it at the beginning, but that just seeing that pig hanging out under the chips, just doing its little pig life, right? Didn't care. It was no problem. And you juxtapose that to some of the more depressing industrial, protein operations where these pigs are just jammed into places they can't turn around, and you have a nursing sow and the piglets feeding through bars.
Yep.
And then again, just coming back to yours, where like you see these animals that are like legit seem as happy as anybody's home pet. They got one bad day, and that sucks, but we do the best we can.
Right. And I try to be pretty open-minded of why we got there.
Right.
And when I look at how hard our grandparents had to work, when a guy came by with a 50-pound bag of fertilizer and said, this replaces, a whole load full of manure that you just worked hours shoveling out. Okay. That saved me a lot of work, and I can get rid of this animal that causes me a lot of work. And so I can see why we started following into those trends that got our soil addicted, that got our plants addicted, and took animals off the land. I can see why it happened. It's just a lot of hard work those people are going through. But we're trying to go back. We're trying to get back to where our grandparents were with more diverse rotations and getting these animals back, because ultimately that's what leads to human health.
Right.
Is that healthy soil.
And not like, maybe not back all the way.
Right.
Right. Like if you look at the modern conveniences that we have now and that we enjoy with our food, with our transportation, with our lifestyles, I'm always trying to insert it's difficulty into my life. Like I was at jiu-jitsu this morning, 6:30 a.m., slug some coffee, go train a hard hour of training, because in spite of what we could do with technology, in spite of the lifestyle we could live, we need to go back to, hey, this is what you were meant to be, right? This is what you were meant to do. Right. And there were a lot better representations of what animals were meant to be and the way the earth was meant to be manipulated pre-technological insertion, right? And again, that's not to say that there aren't incredible benefits from like golden rice,
Right.
Like a friend of mine actually from high school, I spoke with him years ago, and he's a chemist and works for some lab company. And I was asking him about organic versus conventionally grown food, and his position, which I don't entirely agree with, or at all, some aspects of it. He was saying, look, it's cheaper to buy conventional. So I appreciate that benefit. And I don't know that there's a lot of benefit. There's no nutrient benefit to organic versus conventional. He's like, yeah, you avoid pesticides and some other chemicals. They just use organic pesticides and organic chemicals or whatever it might be. He's like, but technology and GMOs have staved off starvation. And this guy happens to be Indian. And he's like, that's a really important thing to me. That's a valuable technological advancement. Yep. He felt. And I think that's true. Like, I'm not saying that people, my dad does a lot of traveling, a lot of bike traveling. And every time he comes back from like Bali or somewhere else, Like the whole idea that we're going to get the Bali citizens to worry about their carbon footprint is such a joke.
Yeah.
It's like these people are burning dung and like barely hanging on. And obviously not all of them, but a large portion of it is like they're just trying to survive. So the idea that, we need to shift this responsibility is like, no, you have to accept smaller yields out of your acreage for farming because it's non-GMO. They're like, no, we're trying to survive. So, but to the degree that we can, and we live in a very wealthy country, like we have the capacity to take a little bit more consideration into this without at least most people without the risk of death and starvation or real hardships. So if we spend a little bit more on protein, but we have a greater longevity with our soil and with our own lives because of the nutrients, I think that's an important thing to consider.
Right. Yeah. We live in a blessed country, in a blessed area. I mean,
the best area.
It is
the best area.
It might have. I consider my part of the valley even better.
I meant the broader area. Okay, Brad.
Yeah, I know. So, but it's just a beautiful place, and we're so productive, and we have access to so many cool things. We really are blessed. There's a lot of hardship in this world, but as an American farmer, I also have to realize that I need to try to feed my local people, because the chances of me creating a product that is going to get to Bali through government hands and actually get to them is pretty rare. And so there's just a lot of other issues that go into this feed the world campaign.
That's a campaign.
Yeah. Feed the world. Like all these GMO crops and all this stuff to feed the world. And it's a growing population, but there's other issues than just growing the crop. I had a little argument with another farmer the other day that was talking about how it would be impossible to raise sugar beets without GMO sugar beets. And it's very difficult to raise beets, weed problems and other things without that GMO. My argument is it also, you created a lower sugar price, because then anybody could raise a sugar beet at that point, because you could spray the weeds out and they didn't have to work as hard. It took a really skilled farmer to keep those, to cultivate right next to that beet and get it done right. And then you're still dealing with nature. But as farmers, because of these technologies, they also lowered our prices, because more acres could have, acres that should never been planted to soybeans and corn are being planted. And so just because technology has come, there's always unintended consequences. And a lot of time that comes to pricing to the American farmer and to other farmers around the world. So there's always the backside to all that too. And to some of those people in those countries that are now using those technologies, it's not always a blessing to them either. And so it's difficult, but that's why I come back, whether it's organic or not, conventional, just know your farmer.
Right.
If you can get on their farm, that's the goal, right? Get to the farm, know the farmer, and see their practices. And hopefully your farmer will let you see his practices so you can build that relationship of trust, right? You have to be able to come and talk to me or talk to whoever's at the store and start trusting what we're doing, because we're trusting you to come and be our customer. You've got to trust us to raise that animal for you. And we're participating in your family. It's your family's nutrition. And so we have to start building as farmers and as customers and eaters, we have to start building these local relationships. That's what I love the most is being able to spend time in the store and getting to know these people that I get to raise their protein. I get to feed their kids. And it's a really cool relationship to start bringing that back, because before you send it off to the slaughter and you didn't know whoever ate it.
Right.
And now I get to see those people. And it's really rewarding for me. They're voting with their dollar. That dollar is staying right here in Idaho. It's rare for us to buy anything out. It's bought and built right here. And so that money stays local. And people can complain about Amazon and Walmart's the world, but if people didn't vote with their dollar and keep purchasing from them, they wouldn't be around. So you gotta keep going with what you're going. And if you don't like something, quit spending your money there.
Right.
And so that's how we build this local environment that is, for me, I'm able to build healthy soil with that, and I can store more carbon. I can feed people, and I can build this life for my family that builds healthy people. I think it's an amazing thing. I love it. It's what I'm passionate about. But, just get to know your farmer.
Right.
Find the farmers you can go know, because there's people wanting to sell all over this valley too. There's people wanting to sell, but I'd love if they came and, saw me.
Get to know Brad. I'm bringing my kids.
Yeah.
I'm bringing my kids to see the pigs.
Yeah. It's an open door policy.
Yeah.
We always say, come at midnight, try to catch us, just, it's an open door policy. The store is always there. We try to make it convenient for people to get their protein. We have drops, we have home delivery. People, talking about technology, we have online sales, it's an amazing thing that my grandparents couldn't even fathom, but we have the ability to connect with more customers, and it's a beautiful thing.
It's beautiful. Well, Brad, listen, I appreciate you. I appreciate the travel time. I appreciate the protein, and I'm going to take a dump truck of pictures of this and enjoy every bite, man. It's going to be great. I'm really excited about this. I've been looking for this. I know a lot of people that have been looking for a reliable source of protein and a connection with their food. And I really hope they listen to this and understand what you're doing. Because again, it's just, I don't want to live the way I used to live. I don't want to engage in that process and that capitulation where it's just like, it's my only option.
Right.
Where's the pork come from? A truck. Where'd the truck come from? The freeway.
Yeah.
Which freeway? The one going to Canada.
Yeah.
Like, all right. Like, I didn't have any other options, but we do now. And that's one of the beautiful parts of being here. And so again, I appreciate you coming in and explaining everything. First of many, hopefully.
Yep.
And we're going to cook next time before you come.
Sounds great.
All right. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
MTU Studios is the proud producer for the Ada County Sheriff Podcast, the Idaho Wildlife Federation Podcast, the State Representative Ted Hill Podcast, the Idaho State PTA Podcast, and many more. If you or your organization is thinking about starting a podcast, MTU Studios would love to help. Just check out mtustudios.com.